Quick question. If you'd been born in ancient Egypt, would you have made it to your 10th birthday? Historians now think it was close to a coin flip. Something near half of Egyptian children never reached adulthood. That's the real subject of this video. By the end, you'll know exactly what was killing them, the exact age it hit hardest, and the strange thing parents did in response. Something historians only piece together from broken toys and tiny amulets. Here's the myth you've probably absorbed without ever reading it anywhere specific. Scroll far enough through history content online, and you'll find the same claim. Egyptian kids didn't get a childhood at all. Straight from birth to the fields. Married off at 12. No toys, no play, just tiny adults with tiny jobs and a short window before an early grave. It sounds grim and efficient. It fits the vibe. It is almost entirely wrong, because the real picture is stranger than that. Egyptian kids had toys, pets, board games, wrestling matches. Mothers wrote down how much they missed them. Some of it is genuinely sweet, but dig one layer under the sweetness and you hit something else. A civilization that clearly adored its children and still, by the numbers, lost roughly 1 in 2 before they grew up. Let's go. Let's start with the myth breaker. Archaeologists keep pulling toys out of Egyptian houses and graves. Wooden lions with movable jaws, spinning tops, rag dolls with real stitched hair, little animals on wheels. Kids at Deir el Medina kept pet monkeys, geese, even the odd gazelle. Tomb paintings show grown men on the floor playing board games with their sons. This is not a culture that treated childhood as a wasted inconvenience. So if that's true, where does the other half of this story come from? The schooling. Sons of scribes copied proverbs onto broken pottery. Badly. The same way kids have always copied things badly. We have letters where fathers scold sons for skipping lessons, and one where a mother writes to her son, "My heart goes out to you every single day." That's not the language of a society that saw children as small livestock, which makes the number in this video's title even harder to explain. If they loved these kids this much, why were half of them dying anyway? Here's the thing. Nobody tells you about answering that question. You can't ask an Egyptian parent why their child died. They didn't leave obituaries. So historians stopped reading papyrus and started reading skeletons instead, which leads to one specific patch of desert outside the city of Amarna, where a team led by archaeologist Barry Kemp excavated a cemetery built not for kings or priests, but for ordinary workers. It turned out to be one of the most unsettling archives in Egyptology. When that cemetery was opened, close to half the skeletons pulled out belonged to children under 15. Not soldiers, not accident victims, just kids. And the pattern inside that number was strangely specific. Death barely touched them as newborns, shielded by their mother's milk. Then, right around weaning, 2, maybe 3 years old, the deaths spike hard. That's not random, and it's not disease appearing out of nowhere. It's about what happens the moment that protection gets taken away. Once a toddler moved off milk onto bread, beer, and river water, it lost its immune shield right as it started drinking from the same Nile that carried parasites and waste from an entire civilization. Dysentery, intestinal worms, dehydration. These did more damage to Egyptian children than crocodiles or scorpions ever managed, and the bones show something worse than the death count. Children who survive that window often carry stunted, undersized skeletons for their age, a permanent record of exactly how hard those years were. So back to those toys for a second, because now they read differently. A lot of Egyptian children's amulets weren't decoration. They were weapons. The dwarf god Bes, bulging eyes, tongue out, existed specifically to scare off whatever was trying to kill your infant in the night. The hippo goddess Taweret guarded the first fragile years of life. Parents weren't handing kids something cute to hold. They were arming them. And that knowledge shows up in the most quietly devastating detail in the whole record. In several Egyptian sources, infants weren't fully counted, fully named, fully folded into the household until they'd survived weaning, the exact window the bones point to as the deadliest. Some historians think families held back a little on purpose, until a child had proven it could stay. Not because they loved them less, because loving them fully, out loud, too early, was a risk a 50% world couldn't always afford. So back to that coin flip from the start of this video. Half the toys pulled out of Egyptian sand were played with by a child who grew up. Half were buried with one who didn't. Same sand, same civilization, 2 completely different endings, and no way, at the time, for a parent to know which one they were holding. That's the deadly truth behind one of history's most charming-looking childhoods. If you want more of ancient daily life pulled out of the sand like this, there's another one already up on screen. Go ahead and press play.